The night was cold and dark in the kingdom of Caledonia. Snow fell on the stone streets as royal guards walked around with torches. They were looking for a man who had escaped from prison just a few hours ago. Commander Alistair stood tall, watching his breath turn to smoke in the cold air. He was worried. The escaped prisoner was a man named Darius. But what made Alistair scared wasn't just that Darius had run away. It was how he did it. 3 guards were now in the hospital. They kept talking about shadows that moved in strange ways and a cold that froze their minds. Nobody understood what they meant. Check every street and empty building. Alistair told his men, pulling at his heavy armor. This man must not leave our city. The guards nodded, but Alistair could see fear in their eyes. There were many stories about Darius. People said he was just a thief who stole from the king's money room, but something about him was different. The king himself had ordered special locks and guards for Darius's cell. No one knew why the king was so worried about a simple thief. As the guards searched through the narrow streets, a young guard named Thomas saw something strange. There were footprints in the snow that suddenly stopped, as if the person had just disappeared into thin air. Thomas called out to Alistair, who came over carefully, his hand on his sword. The commander bent down to look at the footprints when a strange whisper seemed to come from everywhere around them. "Looking for me," the voice said. It seemed to come from all directions at once. Before Thomas could shout or move, a dark shadow came off the wall behind him. The shadow wasn't just darkness. It moved with purpose. The young guard tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow wrapped around him, and Thomas fell to the ground. His eyes were open, but he couldn't see or speak. Alistair and his men pulled out their swords. They made a circle, standing back to back as they were trained to do. But their fighting position didn't help them against what happened next. The air around them got so cold that ice formed on their faces. Their breath froze as it left their mouths. From the dark shadows stepped Darius, a thin man with strange eyes that seemed to change color every time he blinked. "Your swords can't hurt what you don't understand," Darius said quietly. One by one, the guards felt their strength leaving them. Their minds filled with pictures of the things they feared most. Some saw monsters, others saw loved ones dying. Some simply saw endless darkness closing in around them. Only Alistair remained standing, but his legs shook with effort. He could barely hold his sword up as Darius walked toward him. "What kind of magic is this?" Alistair asked, his voice shaking. Darius came closer, not afraid of Alistair's sword at all. "Not magic, Commander," Darius said. "Something much older. Something your king thought he could control by locking me away." As Darius spoke, the shadows around them moved like they were alive. They circled around the fallen guards who lay shaking on the ground. "I wasn't born with this power," Darius continued. "It was given to me the night your king's men burned my village. They were looking for an ancient object that my people had protected for hundreds of years." Alistair's sword fell from his hand as the cold became too much to bear. His mind started to fill with terrible visions just like his men. The last thing Alistair saw before darkness took him was Darius walking away, the shadows following him like loyal pets. The mysterious fugitive disappeared into the night, leaving 12 of the kingdom's best guards broken and defeated, crushed not by strength of arms, but by a power no one in the kingdom understood. The next morning, the sun rose over Caledonia, but brought no warmth to the frightened city. People woke up to find 12 royal guards lying in different streets. The guards were alive but changed. Their eyes were open, but they could not speak about what they had seen. Their minds seemed stuck in bad dreams they could not wake from. King Roderick was very angry when he heard the news. His face turned red as he pounded his fist on his golden throne. "Seal the city gates. No one enters or leaves," he shouted to his advisors, "and set a rule that no one can go outside after dark." But the people of Caledonia whispered to each other that it was already too late. Darius was gone. No one had seen him leave, but strange things began to happen in the royal palace. Lights went out for no reason. Guards heard whispers in empty rooms, and the king himself woke up screaming from dreams he would not talk about. In his private room, King Roderick met with his most trusted advisor, Lord Talbot. The old man's face was serious as he listened to the king. "He has the power now," the king said, his voice shaking. "The power we tried to keep for ourselves." "We don't know that for sure, Your Majesty," Lord Talbot said. "The shadows respond to fear. Perhaps this thief just got lucky." The king stood up and walked to a painting on the wall. He moved it aside to show a hidden safe. From the safe, he took out an old book with black covers. The guard said his eyes changed color, and the shadows moved with him, the king said. "These are the signs written in the old book. The shadows have chosen him." Meanwhile, Darius was far from the city. He had walked all night, feeling a strange new energy flowing through his body. The shadows had helped him slip past the city gates unseen. He looked at his hands as he walked. Sometimes they seemed to fade and become like smoke. Then they would become solid again. He didn't understand what was happening to him. As a child, Darius had heard stories about shadow walkers, people who could move through darkness like it was a door. But those were just stories told to scare children into staying in bed at night, or so he had thought. Now he remembered the night the royal soldiers came to his village. They had burned every house, looking for something they called the relic. His parents had died in the fire. Darius had escaped and later became a thief to survive. He had broken into the royal treasury not for gold, but because he had heard rumors. Rumors that the king kept special objects there that had been stolen from villages like his. But before he could find anything, the guards caught him. 3 days after escaping prison, Darius reached the village of Eastwood. It was a small place with wooden houses and friendly people. No one paid much attention to the tired traveler who took a room at the local inn. But the innkeeper's daughter, Ilara, noticed something strange when she brought him his food. His eyes changed color when he looked at her, from brown to blue to green. "You have interesting eyes," she said, not afraid. Darius looked down quickly. "A family trait," he lied. "No, it's more than that," Ilara said quietly. "You should speak with Elder Marin. She lives in a cottage at the edge of the village. She knows about special things." Darius was surprised. What kind of special things? Ilara looked around to make sure no one was listening. Things like shadows that move when they shouldn't. Things like eyes that can't decide what color to be. After Ilara left, Darius sat by the window. The sun was setting, and shadows grew longer across the village square. For the first time since his escape, he felt a strange sense of hope. Maybe this Elder Marin could help him understand what was happening to him, and why the king feared it so much. That evening, Darius walked to the edge of Eastwood Village. The path to Elder Marin's cottage was lined with tall trees that cast long shadows in the fading light. As he walked, Darius noticed the shadows seemed to reach toward him, like friendly hands. Elder Marin's cottage was small but neat. Smoke rose from the chimney, and warm light glowed from the windows. Darius knocked on the wooden door. It opened by itself. Inside, an old woman sat by the fire. Her white hair was tied in a long braid, and though her eyes were cloudy with blindness, she turned her face toward Darius as if she could see him perfectly. "I've been waiting for you, Shadow Walker," she said in a clear voice. "Come sit by the fire." Darius was surprised. "How did you know I was coming? And what did you call me?" The old woman smiled. "The shadows told me. They speak to those who know how to listen." She pointed to a chair across from her. "And I called you what you are, a shadow walker, one who can move with the darkness." Darius sat down slowly. "I don't understand what's happening to me. One day I was a normal person, and now..." He held out his hand, and the shadow it cast moved on its own, stretching and twisting against the wall. "You were never normal," Elder Marin said firmly. "The power was always inside you, sleeping. Your time in the dark prison woke it up." "But what is this power?" Darius asked. "And why does the king fear it?" Elder Marin took a deep breath. Long ago, before kings ruled these lands, there were keepers of balance. They could walk through shadows to protect people from dangers in the dark. They kept the peace between our world and the spirit world. She reached for a wooden box on a shelf near her chair. From it, she took a small black stone that seemed to drink in the light around it. The royal family killed the keepers and stole their power. They used dark magic to lock the power in objects like this stone. They thought they could control the shadows, use them for their own selfish wishes. Darius leaned forward. The relic. That's what they were looking for in my village. Elder Marin nodded. Your village protected one of the sacred stones. When the king's men couldn't find it, they burned everything. But I never found any stone, Darius said, confused. No, Elder Marin agreed, because your ancestors hid it well. They placed it in the village well, where water dripped on it day and night for hundreds of years. Slowly, the stone dissolved, and the water carried tiny pieces of it to everyone who drank from the well. So everyone in my village had this power? Darius asked. In small amounts, yes, but most never knew it was there, Elder Marin explained. The power needs darkness to grow. Your time in the dark prison gave the shadow inside you a chance to grow strong. Suddenly, Darius felt a cold feeling in his chest. The king. He knows what I am, doesn't he? Elder Marin's face grew serious. Yes, and he will stop at nothing to either control you or destroy you. The royal family's power comes from stolen shadow magic. They fear a true shadow walker could take back what they stole. Outside the cottage, the wind picked up. The trees swayed, and their shadows danced on the ground. Darius could feel something calling to him. Shadows all across the land, waking up, aware of him now. Can you teach me to control this power? He asked Elder Marin. I can teach you what I know, she said. But time is short. The king has already sent his best hunter after you. Who? Darius asked. His name is Magnus. Elder Marin said. The king's mage. He has a small amount of shadow power too. Enough to track you. As she spoke, miles away on the main road, a man in a black cloak rode a fast horse toward Eastwood. Around him, shadows trembled as he passed, shrinking away from the strange blue light that glowed from a crystal hanging around his neck. Find the shadow walker, Magnus whispered to the crystal. Find him and bring him to me. That night, Elder Marin taught Darius how to use his shadow powers. They sat in her cottage with only one small candle burning. Close your eyes, she told him. Feel the darkness around you. It is not empty. It is alive. Darius closed his eyes. At first, he felt nothing. Then slowly, he began to sense the shadows in the room. They moved like water, flowing around objects and people. The shadows are not good or bad, Elder Marin explained. They simply are, like water or air. It is how we use them that matters. She taught him to reach out with his mind and touch the shadows. Soon, Darius could make them move. He could make them thick or thin, dark or light. Now for the hardest part, Elder Marin said, walking through shadows. She explained that shadow walkers could use shadows as doorways. They could step into a shadow in one place and come out of another shadow somewhere else. Think of a place you know well, she said. Picture it clearly in your mind. Darius thought of the inn where he was staying. He pictured his small room with its bed and window. Now step into the shadow, Elder Marin said. Darius took a deep breath and stepped toward the darkest shadow in the corner of the room. To his surprise, the shadow felt cool but solid, like stepping into cold water. For a moment, everything went black. Then suddenly, he was standing in his room at the inn. He looked around in wonder. He had done it. He had traveled through the shadows, but his joy was short-lived. Outside his window, he saw riders entering the village. They wore the king's colors, and at their head rode a man in a black cloak. Magnus, the king's mage. Quickly, Darius stepped back into the shadow and returned to Elder Marin's cottage. "They're here," he said, his voice shaking. "The king's men and the mage." Elder Marin nodded calmly. "Sooner than I expected. You learn quickly, Shadow Walker." She handed him a small bag. "Take this. Inside is everything you need to complete your journey." "What journey?" Darius asked, confused. "To the Shadow Temple," Elder Marin said, "deep in the northern mountains. It was the sacred place of the original Shadow Walkers. There you will find the truth about your powers and how to fully control them." A loud knock came at the door. "Open in the name of the king," the voice shouted. Elder Marin gripped Darius's arm. "You must go now. Use the shadows. They cannot follow you there." "What about you?" Darius asked, worried for the old woman. She smiled. "I have faced the king's men before. Go." Reluctantly, Darius stepped into the shadows again. This time, he pictured the road leading north out of the village. Outside Elder Marin's cottage, Magnus could feel the shadow magic being used. "Break down the door," he ordered the soldiers. They smashed through the wooden door to find Elder Marin sitting calmly by the fire. "Where is he?" Magnus demanded. "Beyond your reach," Elder Marin said simply. Magnus looked around the room, his eyes glowing with blue light. "He was here. I can feel it." He turned to Elder Marin with a cruel smile. "You've been helping him, old woman. The king does not forgive traitors." "I serve a higher power than your false king," Elder Marin said proudly. Magnus raised his hand, and blue fire appeared in his palm. "Tell me where he went, or suffer." But Elder Marin just smiled. "You have a small taste of shadow power, mage, but you do not understand it. True shadows cannot be controlled by fear or pain." Miles away, Darius emerged from the shadow of a large tree. He was on the northern road, far from the village. He looked back and saw smoke rising. His heart sank. Had they burned Elder Marin's cottage? Was she safe? He opened the bag she had given him. Inside was a small black book, a map, and a strange compass. The compass did not point north. Instead, its needle pointed toward the darkest shadow nearby. "The Shadow Temple," Darius whispered, looking at the map. It showed a path through the northern mountains to a hidden valley. There, marked with a black star, was the temple. Darius took a deep breath and continued north. Behind him, Magnus and the king's men prepared to follow. The hunt was on. For 3 days, Darius traveled north toward the mountains. He walked during the day and at night used his shadow powers to move quickly and hide from the king's men. The strange compass from Elder Marin helped him find the right path. On the 4th day, he reached the foot of the mountains. Tall peaks covered in snow rose before him. The path ahead looked hard and dangerous. But Darius could feel something pulling him forward, like the mountains themselves were calling to him. That evening, as he made camp in a small cave, Darius opened the black book Elder Marin had given him. The pages were filled with strange writing and pictures of shadow walkers from long ago. He couldn't read the old language, but the pictures told a story. They showed people using shadows to help others, to heal the sick, and to fight dark creatures from another world. These shadow walkers were not feared but respected. They were protectors, not monsters. One picture showed a large temple inside a mountain. Shadows flowed from it like water from a spring. This must be the Shadow Temple he was looking for. As Darius studied the book, miles behind him, Magnus and the king's men followed his trail. The king's mage had not been kind to Elder Marin. He had used his blue fire to search through her mind for information about Darius and the Shadow Temple. "He seeks the source of the shadow power," Magnus told his men as they rode. "We must catch him before he reaches it." The soldier next to him looked worried. "But sir, the mountains are dangerous. Many men have gone in and never returned." Magnus touched the blue crystal around his neck. "I have the king's magic to protect us, and to destroy this shadow walker when we find him." Back in the royal palace, King Roderick paced in his private room. Lord Talbot watched him with concern. "What if Magnus fails?" the king asked. "What if this thief reaches the Shadow Temple and learns the full power of the shadows? Then we use the royal stone," Lord Talbot said simply. The king stopped pacing. "The royal stone is only to be used in the worst case. It could destroy half the kingdom." Lord Talbot nodded. "Yes, but better half a kingdom than no kingdom at all. If this Shadow Walker returns to claim what was stolen, your family's rule will end." The king walked to the window and looked out at his city. "Prepare the stone," he said finally, "just in case." In the mountains, Darius woke to the sound of howling. But it wasn't wolves. The wind blew through the rocks, making a sound like sad crying. As he packed his things and continued his journey, the crying seemed to follow him. By midday, Darius reached a narrow path along the edge of a cliff. Far below, sharp rocks waited. The path was barely wide enough for one person to walk. As he carefully moved forward, a voice spoke from nowhere. "Turn back, Walker of Shadows," the voice said. "This path is not for you." Darius stopped, looking around. Who speaks? The wind swirled around him, taking the shape of a face in the air. "I am the guardian of the path. For 1,000 years, I have kept the way to the Shadow Temple. None may pass without my permission. I seek the temple to learn about my powers," Darius explained. "Elder Marin sent me." The wind face studied him. "Show me your shadow," it demanded. Darius didn't understand at first. Then he realized what the guardian wanted. He reached out with his mind to the shadow he cast on the ground. Slowly, he made it rise up like smoke until it stood beside him, a dark copy of himself. "Interesting," the wind face said. "You have some control, but not understanding. Tell me, Shadow Walker, what will you do with the power if you master it?" Darius thought about the king and his men who had destroyed his village. He thought about revenge. But then he remembered the pictures in the Black Book. Shadow Walkers helping people, being protectors. "I will restore balance," Darius said finally. "The shadow power was stolen and misused. I will make it right again." The Wind Guardian was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke. "Pass, seeker of truth. But beware, you are not the only one who comes to the temple today." The wind died down, and the path ahead cleared. Darius looked back and saw, far below on the mountain trail, Magnus and his men. They had found him. "I need to hurry," Darius said to himself. He stepped into the shadow of a large rock and thought of the temple picture from the book. For a moment, everything went black. Then he felt himself falling through endless darkness. When light returned, Darius found himself in a large cave. Before him stood an ancient stone building with tall columns. The Shadow Temple at last. Darius stood before the Shadow Temple in awe. The ancient building was made of black stone that seemed to drink in the light. Tall columns held up a roof carved with strange symbols. The whole temple seemed to be alive, shadows moving across its surface like ripples on water. He walked slowly up the steps to the entrance. There were no doors, just a dark opening that led inside. As he stepped through, torches on the walls lit up by themselves, but they did not burn with normal fire. Instead, they burned with black flame that gave off a soft, dark light. Inside, the temple was a large round room with a high ceiling. In the center stood a pool of what looked like black water. But when Darius looked closer, he saw it wasn't water at all. It was pure shadow, thick and moving like a living thing. Around the pool were stone seats, as if people once gathered here to watch or pray. On the walls were more pictures like those in the Black Book, showing the history of the Shadow Walkers. "Welcome, last of the Shadow Walkers," a voice said. Darius turned quickly. A figure stood near the pool. It was hard to see clearly, like a person made of smoke and shadow. As Darius watched, the figure became more solid until he could see an old man with a long white beard. "Who are you?" Darius asked. "I am Kalen, keeper of the shadows," the old man said. "Or rather, I was Callan. Now I am just a memory, kept alive by the power of this place. You're a ghost? Darius asked, stepping back. Callan smiled. Not quite. Think of me as a teacher, waiting for a student. And now you have come. I need to learn about my powers, Darius said. The king and his mage are hunting me. Callan nodded. Yes, they fear what you might become, what you already are. Come to the pool. Darius followed him to the edge of the shadow pool. The surface moved and swirled, showing pictures that changed quickly. This is the source of all shadow power, Callan explained. A doorway between worlds. Long ago, my people learned to use its power to protect both worlds from danger. We were the balance keepers. The pool showed images of men and women in black robes using shadow powers to fight strange, glowing creatures. What are those things? Darius asked. Light spirits, Callan said. Not all light is good, just as not all shadow is bad. These creatures would burn our world if they could. We kept them in check, until the first king came. The pool's images changed to show a man in a crown leading soldiers against the shadow walkers. Many were killed. The king took something from the temple, a large black stone. He stole the focus stone, Callan said sadly. He used dark magic to trap shadow power inside it. With it, he controls some of our power, but twists it for selfish reasons. The royal family has used this stolen power for generations to control the kingdom. What happened to the shadow walkers? Darius asked. Most were killed. A few escaped and hid among normal people. They kept small pieces of the shadow power safe, passing them down through their families. Callan looked at Darius with kind eyes. Your family was one of these. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the temple. The black flames on the torches flickered. He is here, Callan said, his face worried. The king's mage has found the temple. Outside, Magnus stood with 20 royal guards. They had followed Darius's trail to the temple entrance. Be ready for anything, Magnus told his men. The Shadow Walker has found the source of his power. He will be stronger now. Inside, Darius looked at Callan with fear. What do I do? I don't know enough yet to fight them. You must take the power that is yours by right, Callan said. He pointed to the shadow pool. Step into the pool. Become one with the shadows completely. Darius looked at the swirling darkness. What will happen to me? You will either become the true Shadow Walker, master of all shadows, Callan said, or the darkness will consume you forever. It depends on your heart. Darius heard the sound of boots on stone. Magnus and his men were entering the temple. There was no time to think. Trust the shadows, Callan said. They have chosen you. Taking a deep breath, Darius stepped into the pool of living shadow. The darkness rose up around him, covering him completely. For a moment, he felt nothing but cold and emptiness. Then memories filled his mind, not just his own, but those of all shadow walkers before him. He saw their lives, felt their powers, understood their purpose. The shadows weren't just a weapon or a tool. They were a responsibility. As Magnus and his men entered the main room of the temple, the shadow pool exploded upward in a column of darkness. When it fell away, Darius stood there changed. His eyes were now completely black. Shadows moved around him like a living cloak. Stop him! Magnus shouted to his guards. But as they ran forward, Darius simply raised his hand. All the shadows in the temple rushed toward the guards, wrapping around them like ropes. The men fell to the ground, unable to move. Only Magnus remained standing, protected by the blue light of his crystal. Your tricks won't work on me, Shadow Walker, he said with a cruel smile. The king's power is stronger than your darkness. Is it? Darius asked, his voice deeper and stronger than before. Magnus and Darius faced each other in the ancient temple. The king's mage held up his blue crystal, which glowed brighter as he spoke strange words. Blue fire appeared in his other hand. The king gave me this power, Magnus said proudly. A piece of the shadow power, changed by royal magic. It is made to fight your kind." Darius stood calmly, the shadows moving around him like a protective cloak. "You use stolen power," he said. "Power you don't understand." Magnus laughed. "I understand enough to destroy you." He threw the blue fire at Darius. Instead of dodging, Darius reached out with his hand. The blue fire stopped in midair, then turned black, and fell to the ground like water. "Impossible!" Magnus shouted. He threw more blue fire, but the same thing happened. "Your power comes from the shadows too," Darius explained, "but it is twisted and weak. I control the source now." For the first time, Magnus looked afraid. He held up his crystal and shouted, "King Roderick, I need more power." Miles away in the royal palace, King Roderick sat before the royal stone, a large black rock that seemed to swallow all light around it. He heard Magnus's call through his own blue crystal. "Give him what he needs," Lord Talbot advised. The king placed his hands on the royal stone and closed his eyes. "Take what you need, Magnus," he said. "Destroy the Shadow Walker." Back in the temple, Magnus's crystal glowed so bright it hurt to look at. Blue light covered his whole body. When he spoke, his voice had changed, as if the king himself were speaking through him. "You are nothing," Magnus said, "a thief who got lucky. The shadow power belongs to the royal family by right of strength. We took it, we control it." He pointed at Darius, and a beam of blue light shot out. But Darius was no longer there. He had stepped into a shadow and appeared behind Magnus. "No," Darius said, "the shadow power belongs to no one. It is meant to protect, not to rule." As Magnus turned, Darius touched the mage's crystal. At once, cracks appeared in it. The blue light flickered. "No," Magnus cried. "What are you doing?" "Breaking the king's hold over the shadow power," Darius said, "freeing what was stolen." The crystal shattered. Blue light exploded outward, then was quickly swallowed by the shadows. Magnus fell to his knees, suddenly looking bold and weak. "Kill me then," the mage said bitterly. "That's what you came for, isn't it? Revenge for your village." Darius looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No, death is not the way of the Shadow Walkers. We protect balance. We don't destroy it." He turned to the shadow pool, which was now glowing with a mix of dark and light. "The king has felt what happened here. He knows his power is breaking. Now I must finish what I started." Kellen appeared beside him, his form clearer now. "What will you do?" "I will go to the palace," Darius said. "I will take back the royal stone and free the shadow power it holds. Then I will use it as it was meant to be used, to protect people, not rule over them." In the royal palace, King Roderick screamed in pain as the royal stone burned with black fire. Lord Talbot backed away in fear. "What's happening?" Talbot asked. The king's face was pale with fear. "The Shadow Walker has won. He has broken our control. The stone is turning against us." He looked at Lord Talbot with desperate eyes. "Send all the royal guards to protect me. All of them." But it was too late. Throughout the castle, shadows began to move on their own. They grew darker and thicker, filling the halls with darkness. Commander Alistair, who had recovered from his encounter with Darius, gathered 50 royal guards in the throne room. "Stand ready," he ordered. "The Shadow Walker is coming." As he spoke, a large shadow appeared on the floor. It grew bigger and darker until Darius stepped out of it. His eyes were black pools, and shadows moved around him like smoke. "Stand aside," Darius said. "I have no fight with you. I only want the king and the stone he stole." Alistair drew his sword. "Royal guards, attack." The guards rushed forward with their weapons. But they moved so slowly compared to Darius now. He stepped into a shadow and appeared in the middle of them. With a wave of his hand, he sent shadows to wrap around their arms and legs. One by one, the royal guards fell to the ground, unable to move. None were hurt, but none could fight. They were crushed by a power they could not see or understand. "This is not a battle you can win," Darius told Alistair. "The shadows have chosen their true master, and I choose not to harm you." Alistair looked around at his fallen men, then slowly lowered his sword. "What are you?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I am what the king feared," Darius said. "The truth he tried to hide. Now I must finish this." King Roderick sat in his private room, the royal stone on a table before him. The black rock pulsed with dark light, cracks spreading across its surface. Lord Talbot stood by the door, his hand on his sword. "It won't help you," the king said, seeing Talbot's hand. "No normal weapon can stop a shadow walker." "Then what do we do?" Talbot asked, his voice shaking with fear. The king touched the royal stone gently. "This has protected my family for generations. It will not fail me now." But his voice lacked confidence. The door to the room darkened, as if night had fallen on it. Then the darkness spread, covering the walls and ceiling. From this darkness, Darius stepped into the room. The king stood up quickly. "Stay back," he shouted. "I command you." Darius looked at the frightened king with his black eyes. "You have no power to command me," he said quietly. "Your stolen magic is breaking. The shadows are returning to their true purpose." Lord Talbot drew his sword and rushed at Darius, but Darius didn't move. Instead, his shadow rose up from the floor and wrapped around Talbot like a rope. The lord fell to the ground, unable to move. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Darius said. "I only want what was stolen." The king backed away until he hit the wall. There was nowhere to run. "What will you do to me?" he asked. "I'm not here to take your life or your crown," Darius explained. "I'm here for the royal stone. The shadow power inside it must be freed." The king looked at the cracking stone. "If you take it, my family will lose everything. The people will rise against us when they learn how we kept our power." "That is not my concern," Darius said. "The truth should not stay hidden." He walked to the table and placed his hand on the royal stone. At once, the cracks grew larger. Black light poured out, filling the room. "No," the king cried. He lunged forward to stop Darius, but it was too late. The royal stone shattered into 1,000 pieces. A wave of darkness exploded outward, passing through the walls of the palace and spreading across the city. Everywhere it touched, people stopped and looked up, feeling something change in the air around them. In the king's room, the pieces of the stone turned to black dust and blew away. The king fell to his knees. "What have you done?" he whispered. "I freed the shadow power," Darius said. "Now it will return to its proper place, everywhere and nowhere, part of the balance of the world." As he spoke, something strange happened. The blackness in his eyes began to fade, returning to their normal color. The shadows around him grew less dark and fearsome. "The power is leaving you," the king said, hope in his voice. "Not leaving," Darius corrected him. "Changing, becoming what it should be." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were normal again, but with small flecks of darkness that shifted and moved. "For too long, the shadows were controlled and used for selfish power," Darius explained. "Now they will be free again, to seek those worthy of their gifts." Outside the palace, people watched in wonder as shadows moved on their own. They danced on walls and streets like living things. Some people ran in fear, but others stood still, feeling the strange connection to the darkness. In a small house near the edge of the city, a young girl named Sarah watched as her shadow peeled away from her feet and stood before her. It bowed, as if greeting her. In another part of the city, an old man who had spent his life helping the poor saw his shadow do the same. All across the kingdom, a few special people were being chosen by the shadows. People with kind hearts and brave spirits. People who would use the power to protect, not to rule. In the palace, the king watched Darius with fear and anger. "What now?" he asked. "Will you take my throne?" Darius shook his head. "No, I am not here to be a king. I am a shadow walker, a keeper of balance. You will continue to rule, but without the shadow power to force people to obey you. You must learn to be a true king, one who earns the respect of his people. And if I refuse? The king asked. Darius smiled slightly. Then the people will choose a new king. That is their right. He turned to leave, but the king called out, Wait. What about me? What about my family? The people will hate us when they learn what we've done. Darius looked back. That is your burden to bear. But know this, the shadow walkers will be watching. We will protect the innocent and maintain the balance, even from kings. With those words, Darius stepped into a shadow and was gone, leaving the king and Lord Talbot alone with the truth of their actions. In the city below, people began to gather in the streets, talking about the strange shadows they had seen. Some were afraid, but others felt hope, as if something long missing had finally returned. Far away, in Elder Marin's cottage, the old woman sat by her fire, smiling. She had survived Magnus's attack, protected by her own small shadow powers. Now she felt the change in the world. It is done, she said to herself. The balance is restored. And somewhere in the darkness between shadows, Darius moved on to his next task, finding others like himself, teaching them the ways of the shadow walkers, and restoring the ancient order of protectors that had been lost for so long. #Royal Guards, crushed by Fugitive's mysterious power. 1 year passed since the day the royal stone shattered, and the shadow power returned to the world. Many things had changed in the kingdom of Caledonia. King Roderick still sat on the throne, but he was a different ruler now. Without the shadow power to force people to obey him, he had to learn to listen to their needs and earn their trust. It was not easy, and many people were angry when they learned how his family had taken power. But slowly he was becoming a better king. In the city, people whispered about the shadow walkers. Some had seen them moving through darkness, appearing when danger threatened and vanishing just as quickly. They were not feared anymore, but welcomed as protectors. On a warm summer evening, Darius walked through the market square. He looked different now. His clothes were simple but well-made, black with silver thread. Around his neck hung a small pendant made from a piece of the shadow pool stone. His eyes still held flecks of darkness that shifted and moved when he used his powers. As he walked, people nodded to him with respect. Children ran up to him, asking for shadow puppets. With a smile, Darius moved his fingers, and shadows formed animals and birds that danced in the air. The children laughed and clapped. A young woman approached him. It was Ilara from the inn at Eastwood Village. She too wore a shadow pendant now. The others are waiting, she said. Darius nodded and followed her to a large building near the edge of the city. Inside, 20 people of all ages sat in a circle. Some were as young as 10, others as old as 80. All wore shadow pendants. These were the new shadow walkers, chosen by the freed shadows for their kind hearts and brave spirits. Welcome, Darius said as he entered. Today we continue your training. For the next hour, he taught them how to use their shadow powers. The young ones learned to make shadows move and change shape. The older ones practiced more difficult skills like shadow walking and hearing shadow whispers, messages carried by darkness from one place to another. Remember, Darius told them, our power is not for personal gain or revenge. We are keepers of balance, protectors of both light and shadow. Both are needed for the world to be whole. After the lesson, Darius walked with Ilara through the city streets. The sun was setting, making their shadows long on the ground. There's news from the north, Ilara said. Strange lights have been seen over the mountains. The villagers are afraid. Darius nodded. The light spirits grow bold again. With the shadow power free, the balance shifts. We must be ready. They reached a small house near the old temple district. Elder Marin sat on the porch, enjoying the evening air. Her blindness had been healed by shadow magic, and now her eyes held the same darkness as Darius. You feel it too, don't you? she asked as they approached. Yes, Darius said. The light spirits are testing the boundaries again, just as they did in the old days. The circle turns, Elder Marin said with a nod. What was old becomes new again. The Shadow Walkers return, and so do their ancient enemies. Later that night, Darius stood on the city wall, looking north toward the mountains. In the distance, strange, bright lights flickered among the peaks. Not normal lights, but something alien and dangerous. Commander Alistair, still head of the Royal Guards but now an ally, joined him on the wall. My men report the lights are getting closer, Alistair said. The mountain villages are afraid. What are these things? Light spirits, Darius explained. Creatures from another world that feed on life energy. Long ago, the Shadow Walkers kept them in check. But when the shadow power was locked away, they retreated. Now they return, sensing the change. Can they be stopped? Alistair asked. Yes, Darius said. That is why the shadows chose us. That is our true purpose, not to fight kings or rule kingdoms, but to guard against things most people never see or know. He looked at Alistair with serious eyes. We'll need the Royal Guards to help evacuate villages if needed. Are your men ready to work with the Shadow Walkers? Alistair nodded. They are. Many still fear your power, but they respect what you've done this past year. You could have taken revenge for your village, but instead, you chose to protect people. Darius turned back to the distant lights. Revenge solves nothing. Protection is everything. The next morning, Darius gathered all the Shadow Walkers at the edge of the city. 27 men and women of all ages stood ready, their shadow pendants glowing with dark light. The task ahead is dangerous, Darius told them. But this is why the shadows chose us, to maintain balance, to protect both worlds. Together, they stepped into the shadows and vanished, heading north to face the light spirits. Behind them, the Royal Guards prepared to follow on horseback, ready to help the Shadow Walkers protect the kingdom. As Darius moved through the darkness with his new family of Shadow Walkers, he thought about how much had changed. Once he had been just a thief, seeking revenge against the king who destroyed his village. Now he was a protector, a keeper of ancient knowledge, a teacher to a new generation. The Royal Guards who once hunted him now followed his lead. The power that had once crushed them now worked alongside them for a greater purpose. The shadows that people feared were now understood as necessary for balance. In the space between darkness and light, between one shadow and another, Darius smiled. This was always his true destiny, not to rule with power, but to serve with it. Not to crush, but to protect. Not to hide in shadows, but to help others understand why both light and darkness were needed for the world to be whole. And as the Shadow Walkers prepared to face their ancient enemies once more, Darius knew that the story of the fugitive with mysterious power was just the beginning of a much greater tale, one that would be told for generations to come. The end.